Good morning. It is 9:05 a.m. Wednesday, July 15th. This is the TDN Writers Room presented by Keeneland. My name is Joe Bianca. I'm the associate editor of the Thoroughbred Daily News. And after a week on the bench, the hot take cannon is loaded, ready to fire.
Hi, I'm Bill Finley, a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News.
Jonathan Green, general manager from DJ Stable, and looking forward to Haskell weekend.
Ryan DiDonato, racing editor at the TDN and managing partner of Franklin Ave Equine, and watching every single one of the 2,652-year-old breezes this season. I'm excited for yearlings.
Still putting in that work, man. I appreciate that. TDN Writers Room is brought to you by Keeneland. Entries for the industry-leading 2020 Keeneland November breeding stock sale to be held at the home of the Breeders' Cup World Championships are now open through August 3rd. Learn more at november.keeneland.com. Big week for Keeneland grads. Obviously, we had the Keeneland meet that we were all looking forward to. We'll get into it throughout the show. Lots of big races, lots of exciting performances, but also lots of Keeneland grads as well that showed up in a big way at the meet. War of Will and the Maker's Mark Mile, and also out of town Dunbar Road in the Delaware, Enola Gay back at Keeneland in the Appalachian, and of course Monomoy Girl in the Ruffian. We'll get into her in a little bit, and then She Dares the Devil also scored in the Indiana Oaks. So another big weekend for Keeneland grads, and shout out to everybody at Keeneland for pulling off that 5-day boutique meet. Sounded great, was great on the track. Lots of good performances, and it was just great to see racing back in Lexington. It was a little different. Obviously, the track was a little faster than it would be in April, but tremendous weekend of racing. Glad we were able to, the industry was able to pull it off, and hopefully in the fall we can have that full Keeneland fall meet, because I know it's another month or so of racing that everybody really looks forward to. So shout out to Keeneland for pulling that off. Great racing, and hopefully we'll see you in the fall before the Breeders' Cup. So huge weekend of racing as we transition now into the summer months from the spring. We had the 5-day Keeneland meet, which was just jam-packed as we knew it would be. We had in the Bluegrass Art Collector. We're going to talk to Tom Drury a little bit later about him. Really interesting horse. Couple of track record performance from Rushing Fall. I think it's a little bit. Has to be a little bit of an asterisk to all these Keeneland track records that were being shattered and pressed over the weekend, because the conditions were obviously way different than we've ever had for a Keeneland meet before. But still, you can't take too much away. Rushing Fall Guarana, I thought was super impressive. She had always shown brilliance, but she really had to dig in and show her heart this time. Passed by Mia Mischief, multiple Grade 1 winner at the 8th ball, had to battle back along the inside. Gave Chad Brown his 100th career Grade 1 win. So that's a huge milestone. I mean, just there's so much good racing. Monomoy Girl, we're gonna check in with John and see how back Monomoy Girl is. We need to gauge that. Whether or not it's full page ad worthy yet, but we'll just go around and Bill, what stood out to you over the weekend?
I think Swiss Skydiver stood out to me. In defeat, she was so valiant, so game, ran such a good race against Art Collector, who was obviously a very good horse. I think that was the story of the weekend. And the only thing that could have made it better is if she won. And they didn't lose anything in defeat. Matter of fact, I think they picked up more respect and more admiration than if they would have won the Ashland, which presumably she would have. Speech was the winner of that. The one time she ran against Speech, she handed her fairly easily. But, I said this before, and I would say it after, and I would say it any time somebody in this game does something outside the box, or something where they're really, going for history or to do something to, special. And we don't get nearly enough of that in horse racing. So I think Kenny McPeak and trainer Peter Callahan really do need to be commended for that. I think otherwise, in the major races, we didn't really learn a whole lot. Speech was very good in the Ashland. I think maybe we learn now that Venetian Harbor, as good as she is, she's not a 1.125 filly. Whether they go to the Oaks or not remains to be seen. But, she looks like she would just be dynamite going shorter. And I think ultimately the connections may make that. And we all are dying to hear what John wants to say about Monomoy Girl. But I think that was a race. And, she won, but again, what did she prove, or what did we learn? Really not a whole lot. I mean, there was really no chance she was going to lose that race anyways. Really ran against some overmatched horses. Now it's on to bigger and better things for her. The proverbial take the kids' gloves off and see what she can do when she races against better horses.
Yeah, I think you guys hit on a lot of the big racing stories for the weekend. I remember very distinctly, saying last week, and I don't think I was the only one who said, why would you run Swiss Skydiver against a deep field of boys in a grade 2 versus running in the Ashland in a grade 1 where you're going to be the favorite and you're going to run against 4 or maybe 5 other fillies. So a tremendous tip of the cap to the connections for Swiss Skydiver, because the easy layup answer was to run her in the Ashland. If there is an easy layup answer to run a horse in a grade 1. But boy, did she really fight. And up until like the last eighth of a mile, it looked like she was going to get the best of the boys in that race. So just a tremendous race for her. And, whether or not they're going to run her in the Oaks or the Derby or the Black-Eyed Susan or the Preakness is I'll wait and see how that develops. But just a tremendous race by her. Another horse that ran that we haven't spoken about yet is War of Will. And War of Will became one of just a handful of horses in racing history, in modern racing history, who won a grade 1 on the dirt and now on the turf. So again, a tremendous effort, winning just by the smallest of noses. I mean, Tyler Gaffleone just got that horse up at the last couple of strides to win. So a tremendous race for War of Will and for the connections there, the Barbers and Mark Casse. And the final race that I wanted to talk about that you guys alluded to was the filly and mares race, the Sprint to Madison, with Mia Mischief and Garana. And the reason why that one resonated with me was when we spoke back in beginning of the year and said, outside of the 3-year-old boys, who was a horse that you want to watch, and campaign in 2020? And Garana was the filly that I picked, actually, out that I really wanted to see her grow and develop, because you just don't see a Ghost Sapper really start to blossom until 3 into 4-year-old year. And she's no different from that pattern. She ran a tremendous race. It looked like she was going to get beat by Mia Mischief. And midway down the stretch, it looked like that she was going to be, maybe second, if not third. And for whatever reason, she just had that extra gear, that extra want to, and just put away the rest of the field in literally an astonishing finish. So I think all of the races that Keeneland ran were tremendous. There were great finishes, great stories for the majority of them. And overall, it was just a phenomenal weekend of racing.
Yeah, I mean, you guys touched on a lot of them. I guess I'm not entirely sure that Speech wouldn't have won the Ashland if McPeak's filly was in there. On figures, Speech did run a little faster. Obviously, it's not quite as simple as just comparing the two figures. And I think when we were talking about that discussion, at least I didn't really factor in the fact that McPeak had another filly for that race who ran pretty well. So I'm sure that might have had something to do with his decision. Another one we didn't touch on, Rushing Fall. Honestly, I've never been the biggest fan of hers just from a betting perspective. She's kind of one of those horses who feels like she always has an easy trip, or, she's not the easiest horse as a bettor to love at a short price every time. But she did it again. She just keeps showing up. I think she's won grade 1s at 2, 3, 4, and 5 now. She's like 10 wins from 13 starts with 2 seconds. Just always shows up, kind of bulletproof. And she's kind of one of those horses. I mean, they always talk about it with like the American Pharaohs of the world, where they have that cruising speed and they kind of make their own trip, and they never have a bad trip just because, they're sitting in the right spot. And she kind of seems like one of those horses. So I thought that was, another impressive performance on a big day for Chad Brown.
Yeah, I always feel the same way about Rushing Fall, that she always gets that perfect trip. But like you said, she kind of works it out with her tactical speed. So to piggyback on a couple of things you guys said, I totally agree with Bill about Swiss Skydiver. Like, I think, it's easy for me to say I don't own the horse, but I think having a runner-up finish against the boys in a race like the Bluegrass, I don't know, is more notable to me than winning a race like the Ashland. Obviously, like Brian said, we don't know that she would have won the Ashland. I think she would have had a really good shot. I just think she would have been right there with Speech. Like you said about Venetian Harbor, she's maybe a miler, maybe 7 furlongs to a mile. She really got blown by. She had an easy lead and got just pretty much dusted in the stretch. And so I think she's probably going to turn back in the future. Speech was super impressive. To John's point about War of Will, it's really interesting, like how slim the margin is between, I think he's a way more valuable stallion now because he does have that grade 1 win on dirt and turf. It's maybe a head difference between what, like 12.5 stallion stud fee and 25,000. Like it could be that much of a difference between winning a grade one on both surfaces and just the classic last year, because he had kind of been forgotten about. I think with good reason. He hadn't really shown up and done much since the Preakness. So it was good to see Mark Cassidy and Gary Barber persevere with him. He got rewarded. He's obviously got options, dirt turf the rest of the year. So that was obviously another notable performance. But let's get to what everybody is waiting to see. John Green, is Monomoy Girl back? Is she all the way back? Is she sort of back? Is she not back? 104 buyer. You got to keep that in mind. I know the field wasn't great, but let's see, John. What do you say?
Yeah, listen. This race, the Ruffian, the grade 2. The fact that she ran a career best 104 shows me that now she is back. And not that I need to be the judge and jury on it, but certainly when the owner / manager of the horse, or at least the manager of the horse, was touting the horse as she's back after running just a middling win, and we all agreed that was the case against a bad field a couple of weeks ago. That was a little premature, to say the least. But I would have to say that now if she was if I was the judge and jury of her, I would say she is back. She's rounding into form, and that's great for racing because now she is going to set up hopefully a head-to-head match with Midnight Bisou. And that's really what we're all looking for, is for these two great race fillies to kind of come together and run. And really there's not much more to say about it. We can argue about whether or not the field of the race of the recent win in the Ruffian was worthy of a grade 2. Doesn't matter. She won the grade 2. And she did it in a career best. So it looks like now she is rounding into form.
On the Monomoy Girl back-o-meter, we have her at a 10, all the way at the top, John?
I would say that until she beats her compatriot, Midnight Bisou, she's not at a 10. I would say, maybe she's at a 7.3.
Okay. All right. About 2/3 of the way up. We'll keep checking in every time she runs.
Right. In the scientific method of picking random numbers. Yes. Go ahead, Bill.
No, I was going to, you already sort of jumped the gun on me. I was going to say, isn't she not, quote unquote, back until she beats Midnight Bisou? If in fact that ever even happens. I mean, after sitting through Rachel Alexander and Zenyatta for a year and a half and it never, ever came to be, I just have learned that these things don't necessarily work out. Matter of fact, more often than not, they don't. But, you could have taken the easy way out today, John, and I applaud you for not doing so. You said, oh, no, she's not back until she beats Midnight Bisou. In the meantime, beating up on 4 or 5 horses in the Ruffian still doesn't count on it. But it looks like you're being very generous to our friends, the connections and the bloodstock agent behind Monomoy Girl.
We can never have any of the 20 people behind Monomoy Girl on the show now because of this vendetta that John has.
Joe, it's interesting because I went on a soapbox, back in May and jumped up and down and said, the horse is a Hall of Fame horse. It has nothing to do with the horse. It has everything to do. And no, not one email, not one tweet, not one, screw you, Green. I'm not that I was looking for that, but nothing like that at all. And then, even though I said, hey, I'll put an ad in the Thoroughbred Daily News when the horse wins a grade 1 or beats Midnight Bisou, she didn't do either. She won a grade 2, but I still wanted to make sure that I put the ad in. Same response. Nothing. No, thank you. No, you're a jerk. No, serves you right. Just whistling past the graveyard.
I was just disappointed there was another miracle he's back at after that big stakes win on Sunday for him. Could have used one of those.
Well, believe me, in my own office when I was watching the race and the fact that he won the stake, after having not won since the summer, I was screaming, he's back. No press release.
All right. So 2 more things I wanted to mention before we move on from last week's races. I think it is interesting how the 3-year-old filly division has stacked up as, really, really impressive. And we talk a lot about Monomoy Girl and Midnight Bisou. I don't know that either of them are a lock to beat some of these 3-year-old fillies by the time we get to November and they really developed. We have a lot.
Are you talking about Harvey's Little Goyle?
I was going to get to her. I was going to
I'm
lead
sorry,
up.
Joe. I'm sorry.
I was going to lead up to the queen of the mountain and Harvey's little Goyle, but no. But seriously, like you look at Gamine, Swiss skydiver. I don't know where she's at, but Donna Veloce, I still think is super talented. Now Speech has kind of burst onto the scene and had her day in the sun. I don't know that this is going to be a walk in the park later in the year for Monomoy Girl and Midnight Bisou when they run against these 3-year-old fillies, and it's super exciting to think about Breeders' Cup Distaff, whether or not Midnight Bisou's in there for the Classic, but potentially those two champions and then like a slew of really, really good 3-year-old fillies. That might be the race of the year. Looking forward to that down the road. The other thing is I wanted to mention overseas, there was one notable result to me, at least, with Pinatubo, who's back. I think he's back below a Pinatubo back-o-meter for me as well. But he was a champion 2-year-old, probably one of the most impressive 2-year-olds I've ever seen last year. Came back earlier this year and just did not run well in his first race back. Did never seem to be traveling well. Ran in the Prix-Jean Prat over the weekend at Deauville and honestly did not seem to be traveling that well, I thought, most of the race, but he got the late split and he ran on late and was able to get the victory. He's a horse that I'm really interested to see if he can develop third off the layoff, probably get back into Group 1 company. The race over the weekend was a Group 2. So I just wanted to give a shout out to him because he was a really, really, really exciting 2-year-old. Doesn't seem to be the same horse so far at 3, but I'll give him another race before I completely throw in the towel on him. So obviously great weekend of racing across the board, across the pond. And we will transition now into this weekend because we have a big day tomorrow, a day that we weren't sure was going to come earlier in the season when we were talking about Saratoga. And we didn't know whether or not it made sense, whether it was prudent to ship the entire Belmont backstretch community up to Saratoga, despite the fact that there will be no fans in attendance. I don't know that they've said 100% that there won't be fans the entire meet. Maybe they have. I think they're just saying, for now, no fans, which obviously makes sense. It's super classic opening day card at Saratoga. I'll say that. We do have 2 stakes. We have the Schuylerville and the Peter Pan, so those should be interesting. But overall, just I don't know. It didn't give me that opening day Saratoga card feeling looking at it. But I'm sure that the racing will get better and better as the meet goes on. But I don't know. Saratoga without the fans is just not the same. And we wondered whether or not it made sense to do that, but we're going through with it, and we wish them the best. Any thoughts on Saratoga opening tomorrow, guys?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, one thing you're right about. I wouldn't judge the meet on the opening day card. And the racing's going to be fantastic. I mean, this is going to be all about whether Naira is going to be proven right or wrong on what they said and made sort of controversial stand. Going back, most people looked at this and said, wait a minute, you're not going to have fans in the stands. You require all these people to move a couple hundred miles up north, bring their staffs, put in a lot of expense, a lot of trouble. What's the reason for this? So Naira says the reason is simple. We're going to handle more at Saratoga without without, of course, human beings in the stands than we would at Belmont if we ran Saratoga at Belmont. So I think every single day people are going to look at those handle numbers. And if they're proven right, hats off to them. Personally, not that I really have much to say about this. I don't know if I would have done this myself if I were running the New York Racing Association under any circumstances. But if they get good handle numbers, they at least can say, hey, look, we were right about this. If the handle numbers are not that good and not substantially better than what we project they would be at Belmont, they're going to have some egg on their face and they're going to have some explaining to do. So, from the racing standpoint, we know it's going to be good. We'll be looking for all the great races, the Travers, of course, coming up later on in the meet with Tis the Law, trying to win the quadruple crown or take step 2 in the quadruple crown. But, Naira's head is on the chopping block here, and, they need to be proven right here. I think it's very important.
I may be looking at this as a glass half full, but I'm just really thankful that they're racing. And whether or not there's fans there, we can argue about it and say whether, if that makes sense or not. Again, the expense and the concern of physically moving all these people out of the safe bubble that they put together at Belmont to Saratoga. Again, you can make a case for or against it. Panza came on our show and said that the reason why they're doing it primarily is because of the handle. They anticipate that people want to bet on the brand of Saratoga. And they feel like that they need to have the horses physically there and racing on that surface in order to be able to derive more money. Again, you can make an argument either way. He's got all the information, but you can make an argument either way as to whether or not that makes sense. The opening day card is pretty similar to the first couple of days at Keeneland for this mini meet. It was kind of a ho-hum bunch of races, except for maybe a stake race every now and then. The thing that I'm excited about is a race like the Peter Pan, where you have a couple of horses in here that are still fighting and scratching to try to get into the Derby or the Preakness. And there's a couple of big names in here and a couple of expensive horses in here that you can root for. But overall, I think we have to take a step back. Having been through the epicenter of COVID and having been through it, and handled it properly in the New York, New Jersey tri-state area, the fact that we still have racing here and high quality racing is huge. Because when you have to continually write out checks every month for the care of these horses and you don't have a chance to make it back in racing, it gets old very quickly.
Yeah, I'm certainly happy they're racing. I thought one thing that was interesting and maybe disappointing was that there was no 2-year-old maiden special weight on either card. Looking at the book, I think they just had one each of the first 2 days as like a sub race. So if everything else filled, it probably just didn't get used. But it's kind of weird to see a opening day Saratoga card and not, look at some fancy baby race in there, other than the stake, obviously. So I thought that was a little disappointing. I mean, maybe that's just a function of horses starting later and there just not being a lot of babies ready to go yet. But hopefully I'm sure we'll see some nice babies, throughout the meet.
And Brian, just to jump on that point, the last weekend at Belmont, they had a bunch of baby races,
right,
open New York bred races. So I don't know if they were trying to time it that way, in order to have some of the older horses running at Saratoga the first couple of days. But yeah, you're right. There's just a dearth of baby races, and hopefully there'll be more. I mean, that so many people spend crazy money with the idea of running horses at Saratoga. You would like to think that you get a couple of run happies in there just so somebody can ring the bell and get the bonus.
Right.
So that's obviously something to look forward to this weekend. Across the board, there's good racing. We have the Haskell and the United Nations over at Monmouth. John alluded to that earlier, but we also have a couple of decent graded stakes north of the border as well. The Royal North Stakes at Woodbine. We got the Coaching Club American Oaks at Saratoga. The Eddie Reed on Sunday, the Lake Placid on Sunday at Saratoga. But I think the big race that everyone is going to be focused on, this race seems to get a big name horse every single year, is the San Diego at Del Mar. I think when Arrogate was coming back from Dubai, that was his first race. I think, usually I remember when Pleasantly Perfect ran in, it's usually like a landing spot for these big horses as they start to transition towards a fall campaign. Maximum Security going to be in the San Diego this year. First start for Bob Baffert. I always think it's kind of a no-win situation for these trainers that take on the old Jason Service horses, because it's like they run the same. Well, aren't you juicing the horse too? And then if they don't run the same, it's like, well, you incompetent jerk. Why did they give you this horse? But I don't think Bob Baffert is too worried about his reputation at this point. He doesn't look like there's much speed in the race, so I don't know how exciting the race is going to be. I think the only other speed in the race is Axeman, who's trained by Baffert as well. You do have Combatant and Higher Power, former Grade 1 winners in the race. So that spices it up at least a little bit. But I don't know. Any thoughts, guys, on Maximum Security finally returning and for a new barn?
Well, one thing I still see people saying and writing and tweeting and whatnot that, all these Jason Service and Jorge Navarro horses aren't running any good. That's just not true. They're not all winning, but of course they're not all winning. For the most part, these horses are doing a lot better than anybody thought. But I assume now that Maximum Security is going to have a 3-race campaign to end the year in his career. It would be the San Diego, the Pacific Classic, and then the Breeders' Cup Classic. And if you think about this is really huge for this horse, perhaps in some senses bigger than anything he's ever done up to this point, because so far as his stallion value he's got to prove that he can do it for somebody other than Jason Service. And when he goes off the stud, Coolmore and the people behind him really don't want to ever have to deal with the issue of, he only won because he was using allegedly illegal drugs. So if they can say, look, let's put that all in the past, look at what the horse did in his post-Jason Service career, that's the real maximum security. He was that good all along, and he proved it with a win in the San Diego, a win in the Pacific Classic, and a win in the Breeders' Cup Classic. If he does that, I think, the Service thing is never going to disappear, but I think you put it much more into the past and into the distance. And, that is really a huge thing for this horse's his reputation and for how he'll be regarded as a stallion when he does go off the stud.
And I'm pleased that they're running the horse back in a grade 2, and they're at least challenging him as opposed to running him in a money allowance race or some silly, basically glorified match race.
Hey, John, I'm sorry to interrupt. If he wins, will you take out an ad saying he's back?
Only if the manager quotes that he's back, and I think it's premature. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Sue sent me the ad, by the way. Sue emailed me the ad that John ran. I hadn't seen it yet. Talk about an ass-kissy ad, John.
Stop. It was not an ass-kissy ad. I took the high road, for God's sake.
Oh, man.
I took the high road and said congratulations to the connections.
I wish she was mine. I wish she was mine.
I do. You want to open up that can? You want to open up that again? Believe me, I got bullet points on every one of you about this.
All right, go ahead.
No. But, this horse is so great. Anyway. All right. But I won't have to open it, so that's okay. We probably want to edit a lot of that out, so that's okay.
No, we
don't. But anyway, so maximum security, I'm glad that they're at least challenging him and running him in a grade 2, because otherwise if they ran him in an easier race and he won, the questions would still be out there. But Bill, I agree with your sentiment that he's going to have to prove himself post Jason Service, because that's really the big question mark for a lot of breeders, is whether or not they should breed to the horse. And these next couple of races are going to be, basically the litmus test for him, even though he's won, 8 out of 10 and allegedly $12 million. We'll wait and see, if he ever gets paid, from the Saudi Arabia race. But this is an important race for him. I don't know if I would go out on a limb and say this is the most important race that he's ever run, but this is certainly a very important race that he's running.
I think he's going to win for fun. I mean, not that it's a particularly interesting opinion. I'm sure Baffert has him ready to go, and I don't think a couple horses have those big wins on their resume, but I mean, I think he's a different kind of horse, and he's another one who has the right running style, and he's just going to make his own trip in a short field. And I mean, we'll see what kind of number he runs, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ran some, huge number and won for fun and all that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm expecting, especially with the way the pace is probably going to shake out. Interesting that I don't know, I feel like he kind of has to go 3 for 3 if that's his plan to run those 3 races, because, in terms of champion older dirt horse and horse of the year, I don't know, I feel like he's going to have his hands full with Tom's d'Etat. Like, I know he doesn't have a grade 1 yet on the resume this year, but he's going to run the Whitney. He's probably going to win that. I don't know. It's going to be interesting that I don't think maximum security, even if he comes back and wins, I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk from here to the horse of the year trophy. I think, he's going to have a fight on his hands, at least in the older male division. Just wanted to transition here to give Brian a chance to get something off his chest, because we have a new leader in the Derby chase standings because of our beautiful supplemental draft last week. I had to wait till the 4th pick, by the way. I didn't get the 1st pick. I had to wait till the 4th pick to get Art Collector, and so he won the Bluegrass. So now I have 260. Brian has 205. Al has 48. Bill has 40, and John is bringing up the rear with 20. But before we get to Brian, I just want to check on some horses who are running this week. There is some action. We have 6 races left, 6 points races left before the Derby. We have the Peter Pan tomorrow, the Haskell, the Shared Belief, the Travers, the Ellis Park Derby, and the Pegasus. The Haskell and the Travers are the only races where you get 100 points for the winner. The other ones are 50 or 20. Just going through the horses that we have, John Green has Modernist, going to run tomorrow in the Peter Pan. So a chance to pick up some points there. Al has Authentic this weekend in the Haskell. And Brian, even though he's going to complain, has in the Haskell Dr. Post, it has another chance to take the lead back. So there's still plenty of action, still plenty of things can happen leading up to the Derby. But go ahead, Brian. Let's hear it.
I mean, we keep talking this year about how the Triple Crown needs an asterisk. I think this contest needs an asterisk. I mean, we did a draft. I had to go. Well, I traded to go last, but I went last. I feel like I had such a good draft, and then, a month later or whatever it is, we're handing everybody free picks, and then I have to go last again. It's just ridiculous. I wish they would let us, let me cash in future bets that I've made where horses, got sidelined and stuff. That'd be nice. But of course they don't do that in the real world. I guess in this contest, we do that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. What can I say?
Okay, well, this is for fun. This isn't for money.
I know.
The whole point was to have some interest.
Yeah, no, that's true.
The Derby chase, and you had a good draft, but the fact that none of them got hurt is just luck. That's not, you didn't like help your horses.
No, I handicapped that.
Okay.
There were definitely a few that I would not. There were definitely a few that I would not have taken that people took. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, Dr. Post.
Maxwell was going to get hurt.
No.
Going to get hurt. All right. So, I mean, still, like I said, there's still plenty of time. Like you could easily overtake me again this weekend if Dr. Post wins the Haskell.
Right.
But yeah, it's just to keep up interest, man.
Yeah,
that's
it. I need to know where my pick is. My supplemental pick is going. He keeps breezing. I don't know if he's going to the Travers or Money Moves, the Pletcher horse. I mean, it looks like he's training well. I'm hoping he's pointing to something. He's not going to just show up in like an allowance at Saratoga. I won't be feeling great about that.
I heard it was a never win 3 for 25, Brian.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I included that in my handicapping, since I did so well so far.
All right. Well, I'm glad we got that out of the way. Yeah, okay. We all know the rules now. No more supplemental picks. We got 6 races and then the Derby. If you got the right horses, you're going to win. But for now, hey guys.
Joe, is it safe to say that because you're on top now, you can say you're back? I don't know.
I don't have the money to run an ad in the TDN, so I don't know if I'm really back until that happens.
I just had to let Sue Finley beat me in pickleball, and I got a discount on the ad.
All right. Do you actually play pickleball? Because
I play pickleball twice a week with her. Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
That's why I'm staying in shape for this. For this podcast. That's the way I'm staying in shape.
I was going to say, looking less Jimmy Kimmel, more John Oliver.
There you go. That's the look I'm going for. Thank you. Good to have you back, Joe.
Good to be back.
Get on last week.
We'll be right back after this message from Keeneland. Owning multiple grade stakes winning racehorses like Hard Not to Love and Decorated Invader is attainable with a partnership like West Point Thoroughbreds. Partnerships enable you to spread your ownership across several horses for less than it costs to own one horse alone. This increases your racetrack action and chances for a big horse. Check out why West Point Thoroughbreds is the gold standard in racing partnerships at westpointtb.com. So West Point in the news this week. They have Chestertown going tomorrow in the Peter Pan horse that really kind of flash talent at fairgrounds and has had some troubled trips in his last couple of races. Going to have a chance to earn some Derby points, 50 Derby points to the winner in the Peter Pan. So he's able to pull that off. He has a decent chance of getting in the Derby. Obviously competitive field, and we wish them the best. Really expensive $2 million OBS March by. Appears to have a lot of ability, and I think it's going to appreciate going those 2 turns at Saratoga. Also, in the news, because of the Facing Tipton Horses of Racing Ace sale the other day, West Point bought the Topper, horse named County Final. It was a 2-year-old late in the sale for $475,000. Ran second to Cazadero, who won the Batchford Manor. So obviously an exciting prospect as well. And we wish them all the best with him, and with Chestertown, and with all the horses they're gonna have running at Saratoga. So shout out to the boys at West Point. Good luck this weekend, guys. So the big news this week, I would say, is related to the coronavirus. we had a little respite from coronavirus related news, pervading the racing industry. But this week we've had a lot of top jockeys testing positive for COVID. First, it was Luis Saez, who's been hopping all over the country. Then it was Martin Garcia. And we had Florent Giroux, Flavien Prat. So these are like top riders, like top 10 guys in several of those cases. And, it doesn't look great with what's going on in America right now to have these jockeys flying all over the place. And I think a lot of the problems stem from Los Alamitos. At least that's what one of the agents said, that they didn't really have any safety protocols there especially compared to Santa Anita. There were 4 guys who rode on that Los Alamitos Derby card on July 4th who got sick. Florent Giroux the other day, I believe he was racing and had his mask down around his neck and had it off in the winner's circle as well. This is just something that people really, they got to take a little bit more seriously. Even if you're young, even if you're in great shape, like this is not something to be messed around with. And I just think overall it doesn't look great. We've had the luxury in racing of being able to pretty much carry on the sport as normal. Like we had some closures for a little bit, but now we're pretty much back rocking and rolling. And it's not going to look great in headlines if we have jockeys traveling all over the place, catching COVID, potentially spreading COVID. And it's led to some, I think, very responsible announcements in the past couple of days, especially yesterday from NYRA, about what their new protocols are going to be for the summer at Saratoga. Basically, no out-of-town riders. If you're riding starting tomorrow, which is opening day, you are considered a local rider until you leave. If you leave and you go ride somewhere else, you can't come back. And if you ride anywhere else starting tomorrow, you can't come in and ride your horses at Saratoga, which I think makes total sense. Jockeys aren't going to have access to the backstretch. Another thing that makes total sense, you're going to have to meet your horse in the paddock if you want to work them in the morning. But it does lead to some interesting questions about Derby week. And I don't want to talk too much here. I want to give it up to Bill because he did this story with Florent Giroux yesterday when he tested positive, that he's basically said, if we can't go ride at Saratoga, then Kentucky Derby week should be only the local Kentucky jockeys. And I think that's going to cause some problems and some conflicts as well. So I'll toss it over to Bill and then we can just generally talk about this situation that is worsening for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the Derby, as you're right, Joe, is the real interesting part of this story. So we've seen Saratoga make this call. We've seen Maryland make this call. I believe Gulfstream as well. And obviously, this is the right thing to do. And I'm surprised we haven't seen every track in the country. For instance, maybe we will with Del Mar and Ellis Park would be the 2 ones left that, so far as I understand, jockeys still can't come and go.
I think Ellis, not to interrupt you, Bill, I think Ellis did make that announcement.
Okay, we'll see about that. So, but then, what is Del Mar going to do as well? So, this is all well and fine for the rest of July and rest of August, et cetera. But what are you going to do for the Kentucky Derby? And, here's one person's opinion. Shut it down. You're going to have to do the same rules for the Kentucky Derby. If somebody wants to ride in the Kentucky Derby, well, they're going to have to go ride in Kentucky right now. Obviously, guys like, the Ortiz brothers and Mike Smith and riders like that with huge amounts of business at Saratoga, John Velasquez, Javier Castellano are not going to give up their Saratoga mounts, their Del Mar mounts, et cetera. But, look, this is bigger than just a sporting event and a horse race. We're talking about people's health, and we're also talking about whether or not the sport can carry on. And, Joe, you hit it. We've been lucky in this sport where we've been able to we haven't had a single day since the COVID virus. Thank God for Fonner Park and Will Rogers Downs, a single day where there was no racing in America. And like you said, every major racetrack is back. This could be shut down at any time. You see the spreads, you see governors will say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not letting people have indoor dining in my state. Why should I let horse racing continue? This is something you don't want to mess around with. And the big story of the Kentucky Derby, it's going to be a tough pill to swallow. It's going to be terrible if Manny Franco can't ride 'Tis the Law in the Kentucky Derby. It's going to be a real blow to him personally and something that you don't want to see. This is not a normal year. We have to do the right thing. So I think that number one, we've started with Saratoga and these other tracks saying you can't come and go. Number two has got to be every track in the country does this immediately. And number three, unless there's some major shift in the numbers, which nobody expects is going to happen between now and the first Saturday in September, Churchill Downs is going to have to make the tough decision that out-of-town riders cannot come in for the Kentucky Derby week. So it's going to be great news for the James Grahams of the world and whatnot. They're going to pick up great mounts. And we'll look back on this hopefully 10 years from now and say that was an awful time. Thank goodness we got through it. And boy, wasn't that 2020 Kentucky Derby strange for numerous reasons.
The other alternative is that if they really want to bet on themselves and bet on themselves for the Derby, I'm talking about the jockeys, that they're going to have to make at least a 2-week pre-race commitment to it. They're going to have to give up all their mounts in all the other racetracks or their home racetrack at this point, and fly down to Kentucky, quarantine there for 2 weeks before they're even eligible to start riding again. But they can do that right now. I mean, thankfully, there's no major prep really between, you can say, the Pegasus August 15th and the Derby on September 5th. So if people wanted to give up their mounts at their regional racetracks, they could, but it's going to cost them money. So they are in essence going to have to really bet on themselves to win that race and then do it all over again, 4 weeks later for the Preakness. They're going to have to, ride for a couple of weeks in Kentucky in essence, or and then quarantine themselves in Maryland again for the Preakness. So, this is strange times, and the jockeys and their families and their respective agents are going to have to really sit down and figure out what's best for them. Do they give up the it's not guaranteed money, but do they give up the 5, 6, 7 mounts a day at their local tracks in order to take the brass ring and hopefully win the Derby? That's a really difficult decision to make for a lot of these riders.
And I would have to think, especially for Manny Franco, if he rides the Run Happy Travers and he wins, I would have to think that he'll, do what you're talking about, John, and go quarantine. And that mount means a ton to him. And obviously he's extremely valuable. It kind of seems like a sort of a microcosm of how we've all, in places where they've started to open up, we've all kind of just gone from, hiding in our houses, and a lot of people just kind of acted like it was over and maybe didn't take the necessary precautions. And it kind of feels like that a little bit. I mean, there's that picture of Luis Saez in the winner's circle at Indiana with like no mask and 10 people around him. I mean, that's not the smartest idea. And we got to be a little smart with stuff like that. And you got to hope that people, now that we have stricter protocols, you got to hope that this is going to slow the spread and kind of allow us to continue racing, because that's the main danger. The Derby's one race, but if all racing shuts down because, every jockey in the country has this, that's going to be a lot worse for a lot more people. So let's hope that this all works and stops everything in its tracks.
John, I want to add one more thing to what you said. And you're right, that is an alternative. But if you say you ride in the Kentucky, you do the 2 weeks quarantine and you come back and you ride in the Kentucky Derby on September 5th, I'd imagine you'd have to go back into quarantine for 2 more weeks before you would be accepted back into your normal riding colony. I'm not a healthcare professional, but that's
my understanding as well. I think you're right.
Yeah. So you would literally have to give up a month of riding to ride in the Kentucky Derby and the stakes around there. Now, you're right. Some guys, particularly Manny Franco, this is a chance of a lifetime for a young rider who's never won a Triple Crown race, may actually make that decision. But I think it may come down to riding, 1 or 2 couple days and give up an entire month of riding to make it happen. I mean, what a tough decision that would be.
Yeah, and Bill, you're right though. But if they did make a decision of I'm gonna only ride a couple of days at Churchill versus the 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, actually, as we're playing it out right now, at Saratoga or some of the major, or Naira, some of the major racetracks, at least they would be able to go kind of all in for all the stakes that are being offered that weekend at Churchill. So, you'd have a chance at the Oaks and the Derby and hopefully some of the other undercard major races that are going on there. But you're exactly right. That would be a 3 or 4 week investment in yourself for those couple of days, or those handful of races. But that's where the big money is shooting, for the stars and trying to win the Derby or the Oaks. Because once you're a Derby or an Oaks winning jockey, especially a guy like Manny Franco who's never been at that level before, that kind of writes your resume for you down the road. Where people are picking you up and flying you to other places in the country once the restrictions are over. It's because you're an Oaks winner or because you won the 2020, Derby on Tisla Law.
Like Brian said, the pandemic doesn't go away just because you're over it. It doesn't go away just because you're sick of being in the house. You only get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. You only get sports back. I think about baseball, similar thing with the jockeys traveling all over the place. Like baseball, players are going to be traveling all over the place. And I don't think that that's going to work out. Like, obviously with the NBA and the NHL, they're at least trying it in these hub cities. I think the NHL has a better chance than the NBA because their hub cities are in Canada, which has a much lower case count, whereas the NBA is doing it in Orlando and Disney's opening right around the corner. So I don't know how great that's going to be. But, the pandemic doesn't automatically stop spreading. You have to stop it with your actions. Here in New York, that's what we did. We had 800 deaths a day. Over the weekend, we had 0. Because if you go around the city, 90% of people are wearing masks. Like, it really is that simple. Like, I don't want to harp on it like I did a couple of weeks ago, but it really is that simple. It's such a small thing to be able to stop the spread. And you look at these other countries like Japan, South Korea, these places that have really had it under control from the beginning. It's like 98% mask compliance. Like, what is it? What do you think it is in America? 50%, maybe? Like, this is why we're the ugly stepchild of the world right now, because we can't even do just the smallest thing to stop this thing from spreading. And we just want to be over it. We want sports back, want to send our kids back to school, but you can't do it unless you put the work in to stop the spread. Like, it doesn't just happen. These things are, Sean Doolittle, who's a pitcher for the Washington Nationals, he's a pretty outspoken guy. He had a good quote about it. He said, sports are basically the reward for a functioning society. And I feel that way. I feel like sports is the reward for a functioning society, sending your kids to school. Like, these things that we took for granted, they're actually rewards for having a society in order. And we don't have that right now. And, like Brian said, I think this is kind of a microcosm of what's going on in the country, is that people are just over it. They're over the restrictions. They're over having to wear masks. And they're just doing what they want to do. And then, all you're doing is prolonging your time in this hell. That's all you're doing if you don't smarten up and do the right things. And if you go around New York City now, even though we had 0 deaths over the weekend, we have very, very, very tiny case numbers. You go around and people are still acting right. There's still 90% of them are wearing masks. Like, the bars and restaurants still have all these safety protocols, only to go dining and all of that stuff. So people are still taking it seriously. And in places across the country that are now in a similar position to where we were months ago, they still aren't taking it seriously. So it's not just going to go away. You got to do the right things, and it starts with wearing a mask.
Who would have thought that New Yorkers, all of us included, would have been the most courteous people in wearing masks? Like, if you had taken a poll of who's not going to do it, it'd probably be the obnoxious Northeasterners that would say, screw you, I'm not wearing it because it's uncomfortable. And we're actually the ones who are being most compliant on it. One of the things that I noticed also, and Brian, you'll probably back me up on this, the OBS sale is going on right now in Ocala. And my understanding is it's a complete ghost town down there because part of the reason is because people are scared to go to Florida to buy horses right now. And it's a case in point. It's because, they are in the center of the storm right now where we were, a few months ago. And if you just, wore your freaking mask and did things, from a protocol standpoint the right way, well, then maybe you'd have an economic benefit, like having people go to your sale and buy horses.
Yeah, and it's just, the CDC said the other day that we could have this whole thing under control in 1 to 2 months if people just put the freaking mask on. Like, that there's a reason that we're harping on this and that so many people are harping on this. Like, it is a relatively simple fix to a problem that is not going to go away on its own. So I already went off on this a couple of weeks ago, but it's such an easy thing, and it's so little that's being asked of you that if you want to be out of this, if you want to get out of this hole that we're in, you got to do it. It's just you got to do this tiny thing, and that's kind of why I think that we did the right things in New York, because we had competent local government that was very clear about these things and gave us the data and gave us the science and leveled with us and said, here's what you got to do. And now look at us. Now we should be the poster child for America for what you do to get out of this hole. And there's still just so many places that, it's tyranny. It's tyranny to be asked to wear a mask. Like, that's where we are in so much of the country. And then you wonder why we're the ugly stepchild of the world right now in terms of COVID. These things are related.
And Doug Cawthon had an interesting letter to the editor in today's TDN saying that, talking about the yearling sales and kind of talking about the phasic sale this week and saying that wearing a mask isn't a political thing, it's an economic thing. And if we're going to keep this whole industry going and the bloodstock industry and all these sales going, we need to do the right thing. We need to take it seriously, or, the consequences are going to be a lot worse than, having to cover your face for a few hours.
It's so easy. It's such a small thing. Joining a West Point Thoroughbreds partnership can vault you into the world of instant camaraderie among people surrounding high-class horses and stakes action for a fraction of the cost of trying to do it on your own. Learn more at westpointtb.com. We'll be right back after this message from West Point Thoroughbreds. The Green Group Guest of the Week is sponsored by The Green Group, an accounting, tax consulting, and advisory firm specializing in the thoroughbred industry. With over 500 clients in the horse business, they have proven strategies to save you taxes. Learn more on how they can help you at www.greenco.com. So our Green Group Guest of the Week this week is a man whose phone has been ringing off the hook as he had a signature win for his career this week. He's always been a high percentage trainer in Kentucky for a long time, but he got a big win in the Bluegrass. Tom Drury, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me.
Of course. So our collector is the horse in question. Very impressive in the Bluegrass. Has to be considered a top Kentucky Derby contender already. He's got an interesting story because he started his career on turf for Joe Sharp. Then he had an allowance win that he later got disqualified from. Then he transferred to your barn, and since then he's kind of taken off. Can you tell us the story of how you got your hands on him and how he's been since you got him?
Yeah, Bruce, I've been working for Bruce for a long time, and, we had Madcap Escapade for him as a 2-year-old. And, it's always, I've always done more behind the scenes kind of work, legging up young horses and, taking horses when they needed a break and things of that nature. Along that path, he's always left a few horses with me to race and given me some opportunities to win some really nice races. And, he contacted me and just said he was going to be shuffling the deck a little bit and wasn't exactly sure what, which horses were going where, and just asked if I could help him out, which we were obviously happy to do. And Art Collector was one of those horses.
And how has he been since you started training him? Has he always been straightforward? Has he developed? How have you felt he's developed over time?
He's really been easy. He's just a very kind, classy individual. Doesn't, nothing seems to rattle him. He just kind of fell right into the routine. And gosh, he's probably been as easy of a horse to train as I've ever had in the barn. I would definitely tell you that the horse handled Saturday a whole lot better than the trainer did. So he's just been a pleasure to work with.
Hey, Tom, it's Bill Finley, and thanks for joining us. And a little bit, we'll go into your backstory a little bit. You are the behind-the-scenes guy, or have been for most of your career. You would take babies, get them ready for the races. You do layup horses, etc. But when they came to Saturday afternoon, these horses would run under somebody else's name. They're regular trainers, and really your accomplishments really weren't noticed that much. Also, in your own career, you struggled for years. You didn't win a lot of races. You told me when I did a story for the TDN that at some years you just didn't even know how you're going to pay the bills. So for Tom Drury to win a Bluegrass, how do you think the feeling is different than if a Chad Brown, a Todd Pletcher, or a Bob Baffert won a Bluegrass?
It was pretty emotional. We've always been proud of our accomplishments here at the training center. We've had several Grade 1 winners go through here that we've done our small part with, and we've always kind of rooted for them from afar. And people have, there's been people that have certainly been kind enough to mention our name when doing an interview and whatnot. But gosh, to have our name on it, it was, I was excited for me. I was excited for my staff. It was just, it was a day for us to get the recognition, and, not only me, just my entire staff, we all work for the same thing. And, we were all excited and we were all nervous, and, it was a little bit of an emotional day, to be honest. I'm still having trouble finding the words to describe it.
Tom, it's John Green again. Congratulations on the big victory. In getting prepared for the for your interview, we all went through your numbers, and they've just been very consistent. You're constantly around that 22% win percentage, 55% in the money percentage, almost like clockwork. And also like clockwork, what's been consistent is you've always run, between 125 and 150 horses a year, which certainly, in comparison to some of the super trainers is like a month's worth of work, which is why it's so fun to root for somebody like you, that, when you're running these horses in graded stake races against super trainers. Give us your idea or your thoughts on how the industry can help promote some of the smaller outfits, and kind of even the playing field with the Chad Browns and the Baffords and the super trainers that are dominating, most of the Saturday races.
I think for me, I don't know that I could ever be that type of trainer. I have plenty on my plate right now, and I've had a lot of people ask me, and moving forward, what changes I would like to make within my own program. And I can certainly tell you, numbers wise, I really wouldn't want to change anything. If I could improve the quality a little bit, or a lot in some cases, that would be fantastic. And that's my ultimate goal. And, I'd like to think that, there's a lot of really good horsemen out there that just don't get the opportunities. And for me to get, such a big opportunity last weekend, and to be able to do that and to be able to accomplish that, it's again, words can't describe it. I mean, I go to, I'm usually at Belterra Park once a week, and I know there's a lot of good trainers up there. They do a fantastic job, and the only thing keeping them from being where I was Saturday is the right horse in the right stall. And I think by doing that, it not only keeps me grounded, but it also it maybe makes me appreciate this opportunity that much more, because I know that it certainly doesn't happen to everyone.
Hey, Tom, Brian DiDonato, you'd mentioned Skylight. What would you say are the benefits of being based at a training center where it's a little more quiet? And what are some of the drawbacks?
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head. It's just a quiet environment. I think, horses just do well in this environment. You don't have you don't have 500 people running around the barn doing different things. You don't have the races that afternoon. You're not, you're not rushing to get finished because you've got 5 running that day. It's, everything's a little slower. Everything's a little more laid back. As far as being on the racetrack, if I decide I want a horse to have the racetrack entirely to himself, I have that option. If I decide I want to gallop one the wrong way or something, I have that option. It just gives you, as a trainer, it gives you more options. I think the younger horses, I think they need the racetrack exposure, and there's certainly nothing wrong with training at the racetrack. But for me, being able to have a little combination of both, we've got some horses stabled at Churchill as well. And, we're able to kind of rotate horses back and forth as we see fit. And, we kind of get the best of both worlds. And, horses are just like people. They're all individuals. Some of them are going to do better in this environment. Some of them actually do better in the racetrack environment. And, I think for us to have the option of both, I think it gives us a little bit of an advantage.
Tom, it's Joe again. Just wanted to touch on, you and Bill got into your history at least a little bit, but I wanted to go back a little bit further and figure out how you first got into racing, what your first job was, where you've been on the track, and basically how you got from there to here.
I grew up around the backside. My dad, he always trained a horse or two, but he mainly had to gallop horses. I think training was his passion. That was what he wanted to do. Unfortunately, he was just never able to really get his career going. So, when I was younger, I would, my weekends were always spent at the barn, and that's where I wanted to be as a kid. And, when Dad would be galloping, I'd be cleaning his horse's stall and getting it ready for him when he finished up. And it allowed me to learn things at a young age. And I did get my trainer's license when I was 18. And it was for me at that time, it was more I didn't necessarily expect to train a lot of horses at that time, as much as it was just a little bit of an accomplishment, just to get my license at that age and to be able to do it. But it was just slow coming. It didn't happen overnight. It kind of happened in baby steps, and it took me a while to figure out what my niche was going to be in the business. And I kind of had to do the same thing my dad did. I had a few horses, but I had to gallop on the side to kind of cover the expenses, and it's just been slow coming. There were some years that we didn't win a race, and the opportunities weren't happening, and you think, you kind of think of yourself, man, what did I do here? But we never gave up, and finally things just started to kind of go the right way. I guess, I galloped horses for Bill Mott at Churchill a little bit, and had a little bit of a relationship with him, and I had an opportunity to send him a horse, and they were happy with the way the horse arrived. They were happy with the overall appearance and the job that I'd done. And the following year, he decided to have me back for a few others, which, I think the next year I got 2 or 3, and the next year I got 8 or 10. And, once people hear that you're working for a guy like Bill Mott, you've suddenly got the credibility that you need to where you can move forward. And, that led to Frankie Brothers and Neil Howard. And, that all kind of led to Claiborne Farm and Spendthrift Farm. And, it's just kind of snowballed into some good stuff for me.
Hey, Tom, going back to what you were talking about, those lean years where you said you didn't even win races and everything. How did you keep your spirits up? And did you ever think at some point, this is just not going to work for me, and I'm going to get out of the game and try something else in my life?
No, that's never crossed my mind. I've always thought I was going to do something. I did at one point think, maybe I'd be better off working in the racing office, or, trying to take that approach. I remember kind of juggling that a little bit. I never pursued it. I ended up not having to do it, but I've always known. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys. It's this gets in your blood, and once it's there, it's not coming out. So I've always known I was going to do something within the industry. I'd be lying to. At one point, I wasn't sure that I was going to make it as a trainer. There for a couple of years, but fortunately, things turned around, and here I am. So it's been good stuff.
Tom, one more question for you from me. So now you got Art Collector. He's sitting there in one of the top spots from a point standpoint. You've run him in 2020. You've run him every 4 weeks since he's come back. May 17th, June 13th, July 11th. There's rumors out there that you may run him in the Ellis Park Derby. What is going to make your decision, on what his next race is going to be, whether it's the Ellis Park Derby or whether you kind of let him down a little bit and then come back up for the Kentucky Derby?
There's actually a couple of things going through my mind right now, and I know people are getting a little frustrated because I maybe sound like I'm a little wishy-washy, but I don't have a crystal ball and I can't predict the future. Number one, how is Art Collector doing? That's first and foremost. How's he training? How's he feeling? Where's he at? In his training. And number two, the July and August in Kentucky, those can be some brutally hot months. The humidity and the heat, and if we all of a sudden run into 105-degree days, and that's certainly not when you want to be turning the screws every day on a horse. So by having that Ellis race there, it would actually allow me to back off a touch if I needed to, use that race as a stepping stone and not have to do so much on the day-to-day basis. If he's training good and everything looks to be in good order, then I would suspect we might consider just training up to the Derby. But I'm just not there yet, and I just don't want to get ahead of myself.
Tom, you had a horse. You're talking about Bill Mott and Claiborne. You had a horse named Consul, who he made a TDN Rising Star at one point. He had his first 2 races were super brilliant. Never quite panned out after that. What do you remember about him? I just remember him being a really impressive horse, and he was kind of a TDN office favorite. So I'd be curious.
Oh, he was a Skylight Training Center favorite. That was, he was. Gosh, I remember the first the first time he ran at Kentucky Downs, Mr. Hancock drove down to the race. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Claiborne had sold a horse that day for just crazy money. So Mr. Hancock and I actually sat back at the barn that day before the race. And one of the coolest days I've ever had in my life, you know, to be able to just sit and chat with him. And we literally walked over with the horse together. We did it all together. And you know, he ran out of the screen first time out. And I'll never forget that night. A friend of mine, TVG, had their chat room or whatever it was. And a friend of mine called me that night and said, "You need to go on the TVG chat room. They're all trying to figure out who you are." And somebody had went on there and said, "You know, what's the Drury Hancock connection?" You know, I look up at Kentucky Downs today, and here comes, you know, Tommy Drury and Seth Hancock walking over with this horse. And you know, Claiborne, of course, sold a horse for huge money that day. He's not at the sales. And, you know, who is this guy? And that was the first time that, you know, I felt like, you know, wow, this is really starting to go somewhere. And I, you know, I remember when he won at Keeneland, oddly enough, that was the first win picture that my mother was ever in with me. I had, you know, I'd kind of called the family on that one, and we expected the horse to run well. And, you know, it was, you know, that was just a big day for us. It was good stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much for the time. And I just got to say, you know, these rags to riches stories, that's what keeps us going in racing. That's the most interesting stuff. And we're really happy for you that you put in the hard yards and you've gotten rewarded. And best of luck going forward with Art Collector. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Be well.
Thanks, Tom. Take care.
Green Group Guest of the Week is sponsored by the Green Group, an accounting, tax consulting, and advisory firm specializing in the thoroughbred industry. As the Green Group Guest of the Week, Tom Drury will receive a free 1-hour tax consultation. Learn more at www.greenco.com. We'll be right back after this message from the Green Group.
The Green Group is widely recognized as the top-rated tax and accounting firm specializing in the horse business. Why do the top owners, breeders, pinhookers, and trainers trust the Green Group as their tax advisors? The difference is experience. Firm founder Len Green has over 4 decades of experience owning, breeding, and racing horses. First-hand knowledge gives Green Group clients proven tax and money-saving strategies. Visit the Green Group at www.greenco.com. The Green Group, proven strategies to save you taxes.
All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the TDN Writers Room presented by Keeneland. Remember, entries for the industry-leading 2020 November breeding stock sale are now open through August 3rd. Learn more at november.keeneland.com. I want to thank Bill Finley, John Green, Brian DiDonato, our Green Group Guest of the Week, Tom Drury, our producer, Patty Wolf, our editors, Anthony LaRocca and Danny Seiper, and our production coordinator, Michelle Sobrino. Thanks for watching. Wear a goddamn mask. We'll see you next week.